So now I'd like to introduce our fabulous district director, district attorney, Dinah Beckham. It's a privilege to introduce Dinah because she is the first woman, as well as African-American woman, to serve as Contra Costa County District Attorney. And during her race, I think it just provided the energy throughout Contra Costa County because we had so many women running in 2018. And you provided that energy for everyone else to feel as though I can do it too, including myself. So we thank you for that. We thank you for your courage for doing that. Dinah Beckham has had the distinguished career serving as a judge, a lawyer, and a manager. As our DA, her top priority has been to keep the streets of Contra Costa County safe from dangerous and violent criminals. We are also pleased that she is here with us tonight to support Congressman DeSaulnier. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I am really so pleased to be here with you tonight, and especially here as we're kicking off this evening for our own Congressman, my Congressman, Mark DeSaulnier. And so it's really my pleasure to stand for him today. But you know, we got some serious work to do, right? And if there is anything that we know, especially everything that's going on right now, especially in Washington, D.C., we need a person who is going to be there fighting for us. And I happen to know, and you happen to know, because he really doesn't need an introduction, that Congressman Mark DeSaulnier is that person. Now, I just have to say a few things. I know he's going to come stand next to me and say, oh God, she's reading the long bio. But I have to say a few things because we do want to make sure that we don't overlook the major things that he's done and accomplished for us in Contra Costa County and for our entire country. Our Congressman is working for us. He is promoting good jobs. One of the things that he fights for is he fights for wages. He fights for work and for labor, and he fights to keep meaningful jobs and to amplify the power of our unions. So let's just give him a hand for that alone. He continues to be on the front line of fighting to protect our access to affordable health care. And he's fighting back on immigration. He's fighting to restore the humane treatment of those affected by the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, and he is supporting efforts to quickly unite families. And I don't think that we can say enough about the work that he recently did on behalf of Isabel Buesa. You all remember that because of the harsh policies of the Trump administration, she was on the verge of being deported and not receiving the life-saving medical treatment that she needed. So that is a clear example of Mark DeSaulnier standing up for the people. Thank you. Just a few other things. He's making college more affordable. He's helping to expand our national parks. And he's also working hard as a member in the minority since coming to Congress in 2015. He has successfully passed 25 legislative efforts. He's hosted, well, I gotta update my number. What'd you say, 104 town halls now? And he's helped over 3,500 constituents. Right now, we are in the process of even planning a summit, if you will, on gun control. I'm very proud to have his partnership on so many things. Last week, now I saw Monica Wilson here. She was on one, Councilman Wilson was on one side of the county promoting awareness for human trafficking, and I was on the other side of the county the day before promoting awareness for human trafficking. And we invited our congressman, and guess what? He showed up. And not only, he didn't just show up to give a speech, He actually walked the streets with me so that we could visit businesses and put signs in their windows and bring awareness to that entire community. He got to eat some ribs at CJ's barbecue too. But we had a great time, and yeah, and he had to take a little bit of rub from CJ first. But I am so proud of the work that Congressman DeSaulnier continues to do on behalf of all of us. And so it is my pleasure, my honor to stand and maybe introduce to some, but certainly to present to all of you, our Congressman Mark DeSaulnier.
Everybody hear me all right? Yeah. All right, I have a bigger mouth than the other. And as you know, I like to express myself with my hands, so microphones are best in the pocket for me then. First of all, thank you all for coming here on a Friday evening, and I want to thank everybody who's tabled. We wanted to make this not just about me. I know that's hard to believe, it's all about me, but also about the effort we need between now and the first Tuesday in November. So, all of us have heard this before in this room, of people who are running for office saying this is the most important election in our lifetime. This is the most important election in our lifetime. We have to keep the House. We have to take the Senate after what happened today. We absolutely, positively have to, whoever the Democratic nominee is, work our asses off to make sure that morality and ethics are back in the White House and somebody who cares about other human beings. So, let me just say, and if you can, this is always, all of us know how this works. Don't applause until I'm done with all of them. See if this works. The Diablo Valley Democratic Club is here, the Contra Costa County Coalition, Swing Left, Indivisible East Bay, the San Ramon Valley Democratic Club, the East Contra Costa Democratic Club, the La Marinda Democratic Club, the biggest Democratic club in the world, the Democrats of Rossmore, Wappa. We'll give them a round of hands. Too, and if we can give them a round of applause when I'm done as well. Kathy McRoberts, a wonderful, wonderful volunteer. Thank you, Kathy. We can give her. Actually, I think I've got 3 of the czarinas of the index finger here. Betty Boatman was here earlier, Kathy, and there she is. And Joan, why don't you all do it at once to me? They've been coming after me like this for years. I must admit, I sort of egg them on. Chuck Carpenter, our skilled carpenter who's been putting our signs up, including the ones that have somebody defacing them with Trump put over it, which actually I find fairly comical. They spelled it right. All of the volunteers, and then lastly, the fabulous Cindy Gershon and the students from the culinary program. This place, gotta get emotional, is, as you know, special to me. 22 years ago, we had an event here when I tried to redeem my political original sin when I was 18, and I registered as something other than I am now. And for those of you who remember it, I had dark hair, no wrinkles, let's see, we had Gray Davis do a special. You have the screen come down. Jim Kellogg, who I tried to get to come here, wonderful friend, a person who we really need to, he's done so much for me, but also for Democrats who stand with union members and with working people. The training center is named after him, but he's out shooting defenseless birds. This is what he does all the time. But I see this every time. That event, let's see, we had George, Ellen Tauscher, if we can think about her for a moment. We lost a wonderful, wonderful representative who, if any of you heard what Hillary Clinton said about her at the memorial in Walnut Creek, and Hillary Clinton was so eloquent in D.C. when we had the memorial there for Ellen, a very special person who was here that day. George, who was on fire that day, Miller, it tells you how long ago this was. Gray Davis was governor. Tom Torlix was a state assembly member. The state senator for this area was Richard Rainey, a Republican, who Tom was about to be. So it was a while ago. Bill Clinton was president. So I've been a Democrat for a long time. But we did that here. And this building and this local means the world to me. We've been through a lot. The industrial safety ordinance that is now over 20 years old, I've introduced it in the Senate, in the legislature. It is now state law in California. It started in Concord, Costa. A colleague from mine told me that the governor of New Jersey is now going to pass it in New Jersey. That started here, and it was because of this local that we were able to get that passed. It saved lives, and it came right after we lost 5 constituents in 2 different horrible accidents. So I can't say enough about 342, and I'm going to talk more about labor. I love the IBW too. I'm not leaving anybody else. And look, I see how you're looking at me. But Chase Simmons, a business agent here, is just wonderful, wonderful leadership, and has followed a lot of great leaders. And then if I could just point out my wonderful district director and thank her, the work she does. Even though she's become a politician, she's still a little modest. We got to keep her, for all the electeds here, you know what I mean. It's not immodest to promote yourself a little bit, but she's done. I am so grateful at the wonderful staff I have here and in Washington, D.C. So what Chanel mentioned, the Congressional Management Foundation is a very respected, nonpartisan nonprofit back in D.C. It measures and gives advice to both Democratic and Republican offices. 535 offices between the Senate and the House. Since they started these awards, we're the only office that has been recognized out of 535 twice, the 2 times they've done it, for constituent relations and innovation and outreach, and that's because of Chanel. She does it. Our district attorney. How cool is our district attorney? Don't be nervous. I'm not going to make too much fun of you. But it's just so wonderful to see how this county has continued to grow and be smart about electeds. We've had a lot of wonderful electeds, and there are a lot in this room right now, but it's really special. And going over to West County, seeing her passion, seeing her interaction with police and with people out on the street is really special. You're out there all the time. You're not in an administration room in Martinez, and you're working with people. And that's how we have a justice system that works for everybody, and she's a model for the whole country. Thank you. You mentioned Isabel Bueso. Isabel's just spectacular. One of the things about this job, and all of you electeds and staff people know, you put up with some people who aren't the greatest people in the world, and then you come across people like Isabel. And she's such a gift, her and her family, in my life. She lives not far from here. She came here when she was 17. She was asked by UCSF, from a grant that they had from the National Institutes for Health, to try treatment on what she has, a very small but lethal disease. She's been here since she was 24. Every day she's been here legally. I got so mad at an oversight committee when Cuccinelli, I can't say his name, but from this administration, actually said under oath that almost 500 of the people who are in her category deferred action for medical reasons. He said they were all here illegally. I almost climbed over the goddamn and choked him out. He corrected himself later. But she's an example of what's best about this country. She came here, she got the treatment, she's keeping other people alive. And when this happened to her, when she was back there, she testified about when they got the letter, it was a form letter, from the United States government informing her she'd have to leave in 30 days. She talked about, she was at UCSF in Oakland, and that she and her mom bombed it because they were so upset, because it was a death sentence. So we stuck with her, but one of the reasons why she's here is because of you. At one point, I was really into it, and Ayanna Presley, one of the Fab Four from Boston, who had similar cases, wonderful person. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was there. And at one point I said to the ICE person, I said, I just want to tell you something. I know my constituents. And when you come for Isabel, you better bring lots of extra buses. Because before you get a hand on her, you're going to be taking me and a lot of my constituents away. And it was... And let me just try to briefly describe, if I can, many of you have mentioned what's happening right now, or has been happening all week. On Wednesday, Senator Feinstein called over and said, I've got 2 tickets if you want to come over to the gallery, and you can come at 5. So they have these tickets where you can go into the gallery and watch what's happening in the Senate at the invitation of members of the Senate. And then we're moving our schedule around, and my chief of staff, a wonderful chief of staff, Betsy Arnold Marr, I don't do this deliberately, but God has helped me. I hire people of the superior gender. In manager positions. I did this in the restaurant business too. It's like they get stuff done, they tell me what to do, and they get me where I'm supposed to go. But Betsy said, we called over there, and the Senate sergeant said, you can go over whenever you want and sit in the back as long as there's seats. So I went over, and I thought I was going to be bored after a while. Took a notepad, thinking I'd write notes because you can't take your phone in. And I spent hours over there Wednesday and Thursday. And I can't tell you, yesterday I was sitting next to Norm Ornstein, who some of you may know. He's written a lot of books. He's a constitutional lawyer, and he's sort of the brains. He's out on the floor going talking to Adam. At one point I said, Norm, I think you're supposed to be paying attention. Don't sit back here with me and listen to my juvenile observations. But sitting there, watching all 100 of them, listening to the debate, being so proud of our management team, and I thank God for all of them, and being friends with all of them. They were terrific. I mean, Adam Schiff, we talked about him. Adam, when he was younger, lived in Alamo, went to Temple Isaiah in Lafayette, was an intern for George Miller and Pete McCloskey, so he had good genes to begin with. They've been so spectacular. I told a few of you I was sitting back there with that knucklehead from Harvard, Dershowitz. How many of you saw SNL this week? Wasn't that fabulous? It's fabulous funny if you can laugh about this stuff. But when he got up and said that it's in the national interest, the president's interest in getting reelected is in the national interest. Well, if that's the application we have, all 100 people in that room, every elected in this country, our only motivation would be what's in our interest. How the hell is that going to work? We've taken oath to the Constitution, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at Justice Roberts, and he's sitting underneath the national motto while all this is going on. Talk about a message. E pluribus unum, carved in that granite. I mean, I'm sitting right behind where Jimmy Stewart was, and Mr. Smith goes, Adam had a funny thing, sitting next to Peter Welsh, who's the member from Vermont. Vermont gets one house. He went to the same small college I went to, Holy Cross. And at one point, Adam started a riff, and he said, of all the gym joints in all the world, this just happened to happen in the Ukraine. And Peter was like, what's he talking about? He said, it's Bogart, man! So anyways, just watching that, watching the sanctity of that room, that building that you get to send me to, that I get to serve in, and see how people are ignoring their oaths. This isn't about Republicans or Democrats. This isn't about conservative or liberal. That's part of our debate. We're supposed to debate about our individual merit and responsibilities versus our social contract and care about one another. That's what Hamilton and Jefferson argued about, is keeping that in proportion and respecting both. I'm happy to debate conservatives as every day of the week, but that's not what we're dealing right now. We are 1920 folks right now. The concentration of wealth in this country and the world is just like the Gilded Age. That 400 Americans have more wealth than 400, than 160 million Americans. That to be in the top 1/10 of 1%, you make $7 million on income. You make $7 million in income. You know what the rest of the 99% of us make? $54,000 a year. So that's income. When you talk about wealth, it's worse. So we've known that the balance between capital investments and wages have always got to be balanced. You don't have to read Pickering to know that that's the truth. Lincoln said it. He said, labor and capital must always be balanced. And if capital ever gets the advantage over labor, you've lost democracy. Louis Brandeis said, we can have democracy, or we can have a country with a concentration of great wealth in the hands of a few. You can't have both. That's what we've got right now, folks. You cannot, and the interwovenness of our economy and opportunity and politics are like this. So since 1970, that's when it started. When you look at the history of this, we went through the Gilded Age, 2 wars, and the Depression. We had multiple little things like this. Every time we went down, from the late 1800s after the Civil War, we'd go down, and who did the best coming back out of it? Same thing that's happened in the last 10 years. There's nothing wrong with making money and having investments, but you have to keep balance. And that's when you have a democracy. So when we had this democracy, it was because of Franklin Roosevelt, and he actually had a Justice Department that took on large concentrations of wealth and applied the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was passed before Franklin Roosevelt, and is selectively not applied anymore. And ever since the 70s, we've been filling the courts with activist conservative judges, the Federalist Society. So this is what we're dealing with. And the numbers on how it's intertwined, in the 70s, a total amount spent on congressional campaigns in the United States and presidential candidates was about $100 million for the whole country. Now it's it's probably closer to $2 billion now on the presidential, it will be. So it went from $100 million to $2 billion. This is the same time when Americans, their wages were going up 12%, but their productivity was going up 75%. That union membership was going from 1 in 3 households, 1 in 3 employees, to 6%. These things are all tied together. So this president is just the embodiment of everything that's wrong with this country. His cabinet has 7 people who are worth more than $1 billion. It's the same as the Harding administration. I mean, this is what we've got here. So we've been through this before, and there's only one way out. First way is you have to get a countervailing, as John Galbraith said, who wasn't the greatest friend of labor, but he said you have to have countervailing political institutions. We don't want to swing too far one way or the other, but if you don't have a labor movement, I can tell you right now, as somebody who gets beat up by both sides, if working people don't have a voice in this democracy, and that's the labor movement, and that's people back there, then we're going to continue to be clobbered. We just passed the most aggressive, egregious tax plan in all of this concentration, and then we did the absolute worst thing we could do. I walked over to vote right after that. John Ratcliffe, who was the guy that from Texas, and we're friends, but he's very conservative. We walked over to vote. I came out of the building, and I could see him leaving the Republican headquarters, and we were going to vote. It was a nice spring day, and I saw him, and I said, I don't want to talk to Ratcliffe right now. I'm afraid I'll be on national TV in front of the U.S. Capitol. So he gets up and he said, "You're pissed off, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, you just did what's the worst possible thing you could do in this challenge." So I like to call it my conversations with other people's shoes, because they generally sort of look like this walking along. So in that context, we've got to do what we've done before to get out of this. So when I was President of the United States, he once said, Only a fool would try to keep an American worker from joining a labor union. Republican President of the United States. And he had a very activist antitrust department. So when he was president, a third of the workforce was in a union. 1 year we grew by 13% GDP. The rest of the year is 6%. This is when Americans were together. We understood that what happened to our neighbors affected what happens to us, that we took care of each other. And we still respected personal responsibility and merit. So the only antidote is real simple. I was up jogging last week on Mount Diablo. A woman passed me and said, "Are you to save us?" And I was on the way back in and I said, "Ma'am, we've got to save ourselves." So anybody, all of us, we have a gift. I like to quote Kennedy in his first inaugural when he said, "Few generations get to defend freedom in its ultimate moment of peril." Folks, look at your neighbors. This is it. This is what people have died for. These guys will cheat. They'll suppress votes. They'll do what they did today. They'll deny having witnesses for an impeachment of a president. There was a question asked when I was there of Adam. Well, who's it who asked that? I think, I can't remember. But the last federal judge who was impeached, they had 22 witnesses. 22 witnesses for a federal judge. And Adam was brilliant. He goes, if you have 22 witnesses for trial in the Senate for a federal judge, shouldn't you have 2 or 3 for President of the United States? So today, they denied that. They've scheduled a vote on Wednesday to acquit him. What do you think is going to happen a month or 2 from now? We already know the Russians are messing in our election. If this world is just going to be a bunch of wealthy oligarchs, whether Russians or Americans, deciding who governs us, then we've got to fight. We owe it to the people who have risked their lives, given their lives, who have fought their ass off for 260 years, for the simple idea that we don't believe in the divine right of kings, or nitwits, or both. He's the worst governing official since we had King George. And they both have problems. So let me just finish, and if you want to ask a question or two, since we're here, we're a small group, but you're doing our fun Friday nights. You're a wild group on Friday. But promise me, thank you for helping me. I'm going to work my tail off. I can't help myself. But you have to promise me, what we're doing, you know, 2 years ago, people would come to me here in Contra Costa and say, we like our local electeds, we like the people who represent us, but we feel helpless. Well, we figured it out. I mean, we went into Alabama and got a Democrat elected to the United States Senate. We have to keep Senator Jones there. We're figuring out how to take our talents and resources and affect the whole country. So my admonition for you is, this is it. This is the most important election we will ever be in. If you don't do everything you can, if we don't do everything we can, then we've created a sacrilege on everybody who believes that everybody should be part of governing themselves. And the whole world is watching. And don't think that the reasons why there are people in the streets in Hong Kong and Beirut and Baghdad is because of this whole global problem. So there's one way we can fix it without going to war, having a civil war or depression. We all vote and we decide that we want people who are ethical, honest, and will adhere to their constitutional obligations. And then a year from now, we'll look back at this and say, God, that was weird. But you got to do it. You got to. Let me finish with one of my favorite labor quotes. Samuel Gompers, tough labor leader. He said, what we want is unions and equality. And until we get it, no surrender. That's it. I'm sorry, one last thing. George Miller wasn't able to come here, so I meant to do an imitation of him. But I can't get as red as him. God damn it! This isn't right! You know, one thing about the George Miller II thing, this isn't all about Washington, D.C. The reason we're in this room is because we've all supported one. We worked our ass off to make sure that people in building trades, our friends and neighbors, didn't get taken advantage of by Fortune 100 countries or companies who want to do business in Contra Costa the way they do it in Louisiana, Texas, or overseas. We told them no. And I can tell you a few of them, their corporate executives came, and I could tell they were looking at me, and they were going, we got to get rid of this guy. And I had an angel on my shoulder. It was the Contra Costa Building Trades and the Contra Costa Labor Council. It was the men and women who were here. And that's why we have the safest, most environmentally safe and worker-safe refineries in the world in this county. We, because of George Miller, and I'll take some credit for this, not far from here, a quarter of a mile, Walmart wanted to put the first superstore in the state of California 30 years ago. Non-union, subsidized, pay them a minimum wage. We said no. What's over there now? A Costco that's the largest, or one of the largest, Carlin window, sales tax generators. It's got a contract with the Teamsters, and they care about their customers. So we've got to take care of this country. But God damn it, we've got to defend what we've got here. If Concord City Council decides to do what large developers want to do all around the country, is not pay prevailing wage, not do a project labor agreement, they want to do that here in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Because if they can do it here, they can do it anywhere. And we're the ones who said, you're not going to do it in Contra Costa. You're not going to do it here in California. And Dominic, now we got to get one more vote. We should have 5 votes. That's too important a project not to have people in Contra Costa and in the labor movement. Aram and Greg, we've been through this too often, and you deserve credit too. They come in here and be like, oh, you don't understand. This is the way the global economy is. And we always tell them, it says, well, you know what? You don't understand. You can have your business model, but if it doesn't fit with the community model in Contra Costa, then go somewhere else. So thank you all so very much. I'll be back on the floor of the Senate next week and we'll watch what happens. But remember, these guys don't play fair. They've been suppressing votes. They've been making sure minorities have a hard time to vote. They want you to have a hard time to vote. They're going to tell you on social media and 24/7 news things that are blatant lies. This is not going to be easy. This is a fight for the life of democracy. So join one of these groups. Spend a weekend with Kat. Get in the goddamn town. Find candidates you like. Support the candidates who are here. And fight for this country for the sake of our kids and our grandkids. It's the least we can do because those generations ahead of us did it for us. So with that, where's the person who tells me how to think and where to go? John, you can go. Former Republicans can leave whenever they want. That was me. I have to leave. I'll take 1 or 2 questions and then I'll take 2. Anybody? Or you don't have to ask a question. Cool.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, we almost got it.
I have a question, and it's actually not political, it's more about you. We all care so much about you, and your cancer battle, and your fight with that, and you used to run a lot. I know you're an avid reader. Like, what are you doing to take care of you? You take care of all of us.
I hang around you guys.
Oh, come on. Do you run?
I do still run. I try. I go have this beautiful run on the mall at nighttime. I leave my little condo on Capitol Hill and run down. I say I got to go down and see Father Abraham. Sometimes I stop and walk up the stairs and just hang around. Stand where Dr. King gave that speech. Makes me run faster going back. I see the building I work in, and I think of the people in there, and I'm like, God damn it! You might read about me having a heart attack coming back. And then I'm reading a great book right now called The Lion. And if you get a chance, read it. It's about the history of just what I was talking about. There's a great story in there about Mellon. He was Treasury Secretary. I think he started with Harding. Some Democrat joked about after he had been there for 3 terms and ripped off the country as much as possible. He said that the quote was, "Oh yes, 3 presidents served underneath the Treasury Secretary," because he had so much control of the global economy. So it's a wonderful book. My two sons keep saying, because they know I like to read, my youngest son in particular said, would you please read fiction? Stop reading about it, screwed up the world. So thank you for that. And as far as the cancer goes, I have a pill in my pocket, $500 a day. Because I'm a member of the Contra Costa Health Plan, I don't pay anything. We have the example of this country. Sonny McPeak, my predecessor on the Board of Supervisors, and others were smart enough, with George Miller, the Contra Costa Health Plan was the first federally recognized HMO in the country. We have a public option here, and I'm so grateful I'm part of it. That's just my pill to keep me alive every day. The Johnson & Johnson cells, and most of the basic research were taxpayer-funded research from the National Institutes for Health. That's $180,000 a year if I had to pay for it. The Wall Street Journal has done stories about my prescription where upper middle income people have lost their houses because of the deductible. I mean, this is the choice we have in this country. It's outrageous on prescription drugs. We've passed a bill about that, but we have 300 bills from campaign finance reform to prescription drugs to student debt. I'm presenting one on the floor next week, the PRO Act, protecting the right to organize. So we won't get it through the Senate. We sent 300 bills over there, and if the American people knew what that guy was doing, asshole, holding the bills, yeah, I mean, it's just crooked. So, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to watch what's happening in this country. But on the other hand, I feel grateful that you let me represent you and cause as much trouble as I can. One more question. Mr. Mix.
Yeah, Mark, you mentioned Doug Jones. Wasn't he wavering in his vote?
I'm sorry?
You mentioned Doug Jones in his vote, but wasn't he wavering in terms of how he wanted to vote?
I didn't know that, so you just told me that. I was watching him yesterday. He sits right in front of Kamala Harris on the House floor. He's in a tough spot. You know, one of the things, I've told many of you this, George Miller told me after I won the primary 5 years ago, George said, typical of our relationship, he says, Mark, you're going to have to get used to the fact that most of your colleagues in Congress aren't like people from California. And I'm like, come on, that's pretty patronizing. And he goes, okay, smart guy, you call me when you figure it out. So the joke was 2 weeks after I got sworn in, I called him and said, this country is really different. I'm not saying that, I mean, what people think, we need that vote. This is a challenge of this election.
Right.
I mean, we need to win 4 seats and keep the seats we have, including Senator Jones. But we can't be stupid about it. We've got to get, this is about survival, and it's about principle, too. So the perspective of people from other parts of the country, I mean, in a weird way, the House of Representatives is sort of reflected. It's how separated we are. I think one of our mistakes is we haven't, and this is a secret sauce thing, a candidate who can express how important it is to save the environment, protect working people, to do that in a way that connects with people in every state, to say that about people of African American descent or white people. We are all in this for all of you, but it's about fairness and respecting one another, everybody. And that's what America's about. And if we do that, then we'll win in those places. To be honest, though, I have a real problem with any Democrat. I mean, I was watching the senator from West Virginia the last few days. You know, and this is sort of, you should be able to go back and tell your constituents, and I don't represent West Virginia, and I don't represent Alabama, and we're recording this. I'm glad I represent you. But you've got to be able to take a tough vote and go back and tell people why you did it. And have enough faith that at some point, if the American voters don't want a democracy, then, and it's our responsibility to tell them why that's important, but it's up for people to Alabama to realize that what he does, what he would do in voting for witnesses and to remove this guy from office is the right thing to do, even if they like the current president. So, Kathy, did I leave you out on the finger? Did I finger? What did you do with this thing?
So after the vote that's coming in the Senate.
This is the last one.
We all know.
Kathy's the last.
And we know how that's going to go. Can the House call witnesses again? Can they call Bolton, or can they?
Well, yes. So this is the moving parts of this, is that there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't impeach somebody a second time. And I have pretty great confidence that he will do something else. I mean, one of the things that I somewhat disagree with is, someone was talking about me this earlier. It's very clear to me he's broken two laws. He broke campaign finance law that specifically says a candidate for federal office cannot seek, solicit, or receive anything of value from a foreign national. We have that law.
Why are you the only one saying that? But that's not being said.
Well, I say it all the time. If you come to my town halls, we have it verbatim from the law. He violated it. If I did that, I should expect to be indicted and convicted of a felony. There's a reason for that. I mean, the founders knew this. They didn't want people who didn't believe in democracy affecting our democracy. The British tried, the French tried, the Germans tried, the Russians are trying and being the most successful. Every time that happened and it became out to the public, the American public was furious. Now, this time it happens, and almost 40% of Americans are like, hey, okay, my life's fine. That's this. So, and the other thing that he did was the General Accounting Office just gave us more, and the GAO is nonpartisan, very well respected. He broke the law when he didn't do what Congress had approved and give the money to Ukraine. And you've got to realize how important Ukraine is in the context of Putin. Putin wants to reestablish the Soviet Union. He said the worst thing that ever happened to Russia was the disbandment of the Soviet Union. He does not like democracy. He grew up in a household watching people out in the streets. He thinks that is disorder and crazy, and that only some people should make decisions. So here's a guy who doesn't believe in this, and unfortunately we've got a lot of people in this country who believe the same thing. Why the hell you would live in democracy? I mean, if you don't like it, go live somebody else. For severance sakes, don't run for office and lie to people. So the GAO said that was a violation of law too. And we just need to stay with it. If we ever get his taxes, and we're trying, and we're winning on the Oversight Committee, and we've been winning, I think the reason why they're fighting so hard is that'll show the overlay of Russian money, I think Saudi money, and the Trump organization. And then, since that's the last question, I'll leave you with this. Some of you have heard this before. One of the great gifts of my life, when I was asking George Miller what committees I could be on as a freshman, I brought up the Oversight Committee, and George said, Elijah Cummings is the best member of Congress. And I get to say that to Elijah. We became friends. We both like to read. He told me to read the book, Slavery Under Any Other Name, which everybody should read. But when he died, the analogy, and I keep thinking about this, and this is about mentorship. This is what our life is about. I've been lucky to have great mentors, George Miller, Tom Turles. But when Elijah died, I said this at the Women's March, I knew what people in combat must feel when they have an officer who they would follow into hell because he's principled and courageous and smart. And that's the way I felt about Elijah dying. And I thought, shit, who's going to pick up the baton for him? And then I thought, well, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what your colleagues are supposed to do. That's what American citizens are supposed to do. And Elijah liked to say that we are the architects for our kids and our grandkids for a future we will never see. So this is about that. They may not remember us. They may not remember what we did. But they'll know the world we lived in, and they'll know that people like Elijah Cummings and George Miller and Adam Schiff fought for that world. And if we don't fight, and if we don't succeed, knowing that there are going to be casualties, then what's the sense of having a democracy in the first place? So, what are we going to do? Everybody go sign up back there for Henry.